What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to FudgeMuppet. I'm Scott, here with Michael and Drew, as always, and today we are talking about the faction of warriors from Skyrim, the Companions. Who wants to take it away first?
Well, the Companions have a very long history, coming all the way from the events with Ysgramor and the Night of Tears. So just the background on that is you have the Snow Elves in Skyrim, and you have the men, and they lived in peace relatively. Like some people say, they had problems as well. But then the humans built Sarthal, their first city. And then, of course, there was the Night of Tears event where the Snow Elves attacked them and slaughtered them all. Nobody knows exactly why. Some people think it's because they feared the Nords' culture was surpassing their own. Other people think it's because the Nords found the Eye of Magnus beneath Sarthal, which you find in the College of Winterhold storyline in Skyrim. And then Ysgramor and his two sons are basically the only survivors. They flee back to Atmora, where they tell of the atrocities that happened in Skyrim, rally a bunch of vengeance-hungry Atmorans to come sail back to Skyrim and exterminate all the elves. And they are basically called Ysgramor and his 500 companions. And that's the beginning of things.
It's pretty epic that it's just 500 as well. And I kind of like
it's not many, is it?
Yeah, but it's like, possible. Like, I also like that, with superior tactics and so on. But I also like, there could be powerful thumb users amongst them. All kinds of stuff. But I like the mythological, like, it's kind of like, I know that, how there's like the 300 Spartans. They had like some 1,000 other Greeks fighting with them in reality. But it's much cooler to think of the 300 Spartans fighting like millions.
So do we think that it's definitely there were 500 in total? Or do you think like their crew, would they have counted every member of their crews, for example, on their ships?
I imagine the people that they just rode at the ships as well, like their warriors were the rowers as well, like, put their shield on the side, like that.
Well,
classic.
especially when you consider the fact that they split up to take over Skyrim too. So 500 isn't many when you're all together, let alone when you spread out to go and conquer every corner of the province.
Well, I guess that's why the people often underestimate the Nords, because they don't have the same innate arcane talents as a lot of elves. Or the lifespan and so on, but obviously just based on their actions and the outcome, they must be pretty powerful, dangerous foes to deal with. I think it's a pretty cool thing that the Nords did split up, and you kind of ended up with a lot of the rules and customs that went on to make the Companions as we have them today. For example, eventually there was a thing called the Circle, which was an Ysgramor thing with his most trusted people. And that kind of wasn't always there, but then it was brought back at some point by, I think, one of the Harbingers later. There's been many Harbingers throughout the years.
And I guess we can also connect the dots for people. So one of Ysgramor's companions was called Jig the River, and he was one of the captains of the ship, Jorvaskr. And that ship turned upside down as what becomes the Mead Hall in Jorvaskr. And that's where that's where connecting, obviously, like, you see the modern companions in that hall. It's kind of crazy that a wooden ship stayed around for thousands of years, but, magic and such. It could be some like special Atmoran wood from the Elder Wood.
It's equally crazy how they managed to get it there. Really.
Yeah, because it's so far from water.
Yeah, because there's been strategies in real history of portaging ships where you kind of you can roll it on logs or whatever, but this is quite a large ship, and it's going uphill at times as well, and it does make you think that because as much as the original 500 companions are surrounded in so much kind of like mythology as well as history, you wonder just quite how powerful they are, or how powerful some of them must have been when they're doing this kind of weird stuff.
For sure. But anyway, so aside from the Jorvaskr ship, there were the other ships. So there was the Kalkaz, the Krillot Lock, the Fallowfire, the Saidan Wraith, and the Ilgamet. And so you have the circle of captains who together decided that each ship's crew should go forth on its own accord and make its own legend. So obviously some went into the Rift, others went to other places of Skyrim, but that's the spreading out. Then over hundreds of years later, they kind of became more of an established mercenary group in Skyrim, doing different things, still with harbingers, but it wasn't until late Second Era that the circle, or the Captain's Circle theme came back. So that was with Kirinil Longnose, gathered the true hearts of the companions in the wild. Well, actually, that's when he kills the usurpers, isn't it, and becomes harbinger, and then founds the circle. Yeah.
There's a big transformation. Like the companions of today aren't the same as the companions of 500 years ago, let alone like, thousands of years ago. Like it's a real sort of like, there's a lot of development, and it's sort of just like a cultural, like, yeah, we're like close to Ysgramor, but if you actually look, like Ysgramor would not be tolerating dark elves, for example, or high elves in the companions. You know what I mean? Like in terms of the ideology of Ysgramor thousands of years ago to the companions of now, there's not a lot outside of like, yeah, Nord warriors, let's fight together kind of thing. There's not a whole lot there, or like, common reverence for Ysgramor, but there's not a lot of like practice.
It's more of a Daedric cult now.
Yeah.
Well, just for clarity as well, when I talk about usurpers, there was supposedly this long line of dishonorable harbingers that weren't true to the companions' ways, and that's why Kirinil Longnose went in and kind of tried to like reinvigorate the core message of what the companions were and who they are, which I guess by the time of Skyrim he didn't do the best job in terms of how it all ended up. But yeah, they kind of have these values of honor and never backing down from a fight and things like that, but it can get very vague.
Yeah, like our criticisms of them in the past have essentially been that they're just mercenaries with a coat of paint of honor. Like in terms of their actions, a lot of the time they're pretty just like straight up mercenaries.
Yeah, it's
There's nothing
honor through blood, might is right kind of stuff. You don't want to be seen as like a wuss or a whelp, as they like to say. Like you want to prove yourself to be a strong fighter, but that's kind of it. Like even in Skyrim, you look at some of the Radiant quests they have you do. You can be sent to go and beat up like a person for causing trouble, but you don't actually know why. And I think you can actually ask, I think it's Farkas, the quest giver, you say like, why? And he's like, that's not the companion's business to like ask questions. Like it's this focus on and a fixation on being neutral, but if you don't know the context, then you're just a gun and letting someone else pay to pull the trigger. Like like it could be, I think I said in my problems with the companions video is that it could be a situation where there's some Nord living in his nice house on some fertile area, and some, I don't know, rich guy wants him to sell him his land for heaps cheap so he can set up a mine there because he reckons that would be a good business opportunity. And the person doesn't want to sell their land, and so the rich businessman goes and gets the companions involved and says he's causing me trouble. And then you head on over there and fist fight him and beat him into submission, and then he agrees to sell his land. Like, but I don't ask any questions. Like, I don't know. Doesn't really feel like honor to me. I understand the main principle of like not backing down from a fight. They brawl each other and put each other through physical tests, and they'll fight to the death by a shield brother or shield sister's side. That stuff all stands. That's fine. But I think a lot of the traditional values as well, like you were saying, Scott, like Ysgramor, like he would have hated elves, for example, that all got thrown out of the window, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it then just becomes, why are you guys LARPing as this ancient Ysgramor cult when you're very far from it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And as we look into some of the, made a video on it, the hidden truth of the silver hand. But if you actually look into the silver hand, there's some really interesting theories about the actual split of the silver hand being split off from the companions, and then in fact that the silver hand are more closely aligned, I guess, to Isgramor's ways. Like, for example, the big elephant in the room, or werewolf in the room, so to speak, is that the companions are all werewolves now, and they're right in with this lycanthropy stuff. Obviously, they die and go to the hunting grounds of Hircine and so on. And this is completely like, other side of the laneway from what Isgramor and the Nords would believe, like the true things of honor and so on. Like, it's they all want to go to Sovngarde and fight in Shaw's wars in the future and stuff like that. It's so that all started when there was a harbinger called Turfig who accepted a gift from the Glenmoral Coven of witches, via Hircine, all that kind of stuff, and they became werewolves, and they would go on. But the idea was that Turfig accepted it, it was going to be temporary, like not forever. But it seemed like they were kind of tricked or sort of coerced into a different kind of path where it's going to be a curse that goes on forever. But Turfig's the last harbinger who actually regrets it. Like, he wish it never happened, because all the ones
At least
after,
we can gather that from Kodlak's journal.
Yeah.
Because Kodlak keeps having this dream where he sees the line of harbingers start with Isgramor. They all are ascending to Sovngarde until it comes to... Is it Turfig, you said?
Yeah.
I think that's how I'd pronounce it. And Turfig tries to enter Sovngarde, but before he can even approach Sun, he's set upon by a great wolf who pulls him into the hunting grounds, and Turfig's regretful, but also eager to join Hircine after a lifetime of service as a beast. But then... in his journal, Kodlak says, "Then I see every next harbinger turn away from Sovngarde and enter the hunting grounds of their own accord until it comes to me." And obviously, as we know, in Skyrim, he is pretty anti-werewolf. He did technically agree to become one. It's not like a magic curse where you just get, turned into a werewolf and didn't expect it. I can only assume it must have been in his younger years. When he was a mercenary, and there was the harbinger, I think a red guard who picked him up and brought him in, kind of.
Yeah, I can't remember if it was a red guard or not, but it was in Hammerfell. I think he got recruited.
Yeah,
in Hammerfell.
okay.
That's probably the thing. But regardless, so with that whole thing starting off with Turfig, there's this idea that the Silverhand are actually split off from the companions, and they want to basically cleanse the companions of these werewolves' filth, because they specifically reference the companions plenty, and they're like, he wears that armor, he dies, in reference to the wolf armor. And they all the Silverhand members, they have an unusually high chance of having Isgramor's songs as books appear on their corpses and so on. So there's this kind of... Look, ultimately, to preface all this, it sort of seems that Bethesda didn't flesh this idea out fully. It feels like it might have been a thing, but then they kind of we'll kind of got to rush through it, and because there's all the breadcrumbs are there for why they're the split off, but there's no
they definitely
hard...
seem like a split off faction. Like you're saying with the books, I think it's a... Don't quote me on the first part. It's like a low chance that any Silverhand member has a book. I think it could be 10%, 7% chance. But if they do, there's a 73, I think, basically roughly 3 in 4 chance that book is one of those song books.
And one of the biggest...
And why would they have that? You think about the Silverhand in their current state, they're made up of... Because you could be Skyrim has lots of Nords. Nords could carry those books about Isgramor for sure. But then you look and you see the Silverhands filled with orcs, dark elves, Nords, which the companions currently are filled with, because that is not necessarily related to them being a werewolf. The whole idea that any race, not just a Nord, can become part of the companions, that was introduced before. Not everyone agreed with that, but that happened, and you were free to abandon the faction if you wanted to.
Sorry. Go.
Oh, I'm just saying they have it, and they're obsessed with getting the fragments of Wuthrad. Even in the quest where you go with it's Farkas, right? You go at the start. I always confuse their names
Farkas
together.
At the start, yeah.
And then you go in there looking for a fragment of Wuthrad because you're tipped off about where it is, and the Silverhand are waiting for you. That could be a trap that they could set without there actually being a fragment of Wuthrad there. There was no reason for there to actually be one there if it was just a trick. And you'll notice that all of the quests involve going and hunting down these fragments of Wuthrad, which they have. And when they finally do, spoilers, but I'm sure you've all played the Companions. When they finally do assault Jorvaskar and Kodlak dies, they don't seem to kill anyone else, they quickly escape with the pieces of Wuthrai, which they went and stole. Like, they're not there to just bait you into coming to get those fragments. They obviously want them for some reason.
And they're like, and like you're just saying, when they attack, it's like they're clearly, their highest goal is not to just obliterate and like massacre all of the companions, because they wanted to get those shards. Like, they had opportunity to. Like, you say, oh, they got fought off, but I feel like they could have overpowered them, considering the Harbinger was dead and there weren't enough people to protect him or whatnot. But but ultimately, Wuthrat is some, item of reverence for them. Like, why would you go to all the effort to go and get it if not? Who else has this reverence for Ysgramor outside of the companions? You could go your typical Nord, but like we say, there's orcs, there's multiple elves, different members of the Silver Hand that are.
It does feel silly though. I understand it just from a cultural perspective, but like even the New Age companions versus the Silver Hand, if we're saying that they are more in line with the old way of things and mostly against the werewolf split, but they're obviously of all different races, including elves, and Wuthrat is quite literally a mass elf killing weapon that they're all coveting. The companions are coveting it as they LARP as Ysgramor followers, and the Silver Hand potentially as real, likers of or lovers of Ysgramor. They all want it too.
It's a religious divergence at the end of the day, and I wouldn't even say that the Silver Hand are any better, because they're trying to purge certain elements from the companions, while, like as you said, they're not exactly following in Ysgramor's footsteps either. I mean, I'd argue that the closest to the companions are the Stormcloaks. I think the companions got obsessed with, if they're reading the Songs of the Return, they're like, oh wow, Ysgramor is this incredible warrior. We want to be the strongest we can possibly be by any means necessary, which kind of goes against really what Ysgramor's and the 500 companions' return actually meant. It was more about securing the land they thought was theirs, and and that's why the anti-elven sentiment comes into it. And really, none of that exists anymore, short of just obsessing over a guy who they considered to be a good warrior. Really,
and there's many warriors to pick from.
Yeah, Kodlak might be one of the few who kind of is, has started to see that. Oh wait, it's more about Ysgramor's teachings as opposed to just him being a warrior. Like, I mean, Ysgramor was the first to record history, the first human to record history, right? It's like he's more than just a killer as much as he killed a lot.
Like, even if you were to look at, like, it's almost unfair to really even put them in the same basket. Like, if you looked at, the 500 companions here in the timeline, the amount of, cultural, divergences and split-offs, like we were saying, considering the fact that there's the sort of idea that all races should be accepted into the companions was a split-off idea that became the dominant one that happened before there would even be, a Silver Hand and companion, the current split-off, you know what I mean? Like, there's so many divergences, and it's so far removed from Ysgramor himself and the 500 companions, outside of the namesake and the,
And companions is a pretty generic term that can just be referred to anything. Yeah, it's just they took up shop in this cool-looking, flipped-over longship. That's the similarities.
Interestingly enough, it seems like a lot of the problems that the Companions Guild has run into actually do stem from them using this kind of Ysgramor-centric view of authority. Like, there's this whole idea that the Harbinger isn't actually like a dictator. He's not a leader who says, no, we do it like this. The Harbinger actually serves as like an advisor. So, like, a lot of people would say, if Kodlak's in control and he doesn't like the werewolf stuff, why doesn't he just get Skjor and Ayla and the rest of the circle to not make the player a werewolf and to stop doing this stuff? But he doesn't have control over it. All he does is give advice. But they have this, they focus on free will. If you look into their kind of some of their concepts, it's very much like where the circle, they serve as role models of good warriors to everyone else, but the Harbinger can't actually be like, no, cut that werewolf stuff out.
But then again, looking at it from just a definition perspective, the Harbinger kind of guiding them, or as you said, setting them on the right path or whatnot. If the Harbinger kind of sets them on the wrong path and they're going really far away from what matters, then maybe a bit more of an authoritarian approach is kind of necessary to be a advisor or a guide, if that makes sense. It's it sounds counterintuitive.
I agree. I mean, you look at every faction in the game, they all have their leader who kind of, at the end of the day, has that veto, call the shots power. But if it's all, wazy woozy, whatever, you can get away with a lot. I mean, if you like, there's a book in Skyrim and the Elder Scrolls Online called Great Harbingers of the Companions. And it says the Companions have never had a true leader since Isgramor. We Companions are capable of leading our own destinies to glory. The Harbinger advises, resolves disputes, and helps to clarify when questions arise of the nature of honor. In the thousands of years the Companions have held at Jorveska, there have been Harbingers both terrible and brilliant, those known for their arm, those for their hearts, and those for their minds. So you can see they almost feel like more of a greatly respected mediator, as opposed to someone with like, the stick to be like, nah, if they disagree with something.
As I said, it's so funny that like honor is such a vague sort of nothing term in reality. Because if you look, like, if you kind of peel stuff back, it kind of becomes that honor is just adherence to a set of codes or laws or a contract or whatever. If you honor something, so there's nothing like
like the Dark Brotherhood have honor in their code.
Yeah, they honor their contracts
and follow their code.
Yeah.
But so the Companions don't have a code. They kind of protect Skyrim and her people in a way. I mean, like, it's their job to go out and like, besides the beat up a thug. But they go out and they deal with giants and threats and things like that. But it's
But if you're not going to pay them, they're not going to do it.
But
but
I suppose
because at the end of the day, in terms of like political and war conflicts, they're not going to get involved.
I suppose.
So it's kind of like.
But I'll just play devil's advocate here and say that nothing's free, just in the sense of like they got to eat. It's not like you go into Jorveska and they're like all walking around with gold chains and like they're all like cashed out. Like they're not exactly. Yeah. So it could be like kind of like monks where it's like. Or not monks, but just imagine they're paid like an extremely low amount compared to like a proper mercenary. I'm not saying this is the case. Right. I'm just saying it could be, just because they don't seem to be drowning in wealth.
So the monk analogy, I was actually going to say something very similar, because that almost seems like it would be a good direction for them to go, perhaps with, if Ulfric and the Stormcloaks were to win, to kind of reinstate the Companions as being more like what they initially were. Because obviously, like, the jump between Isgramor and the 500 Companions and the Companions, as we kind of touched on, is that several hundred years later, they just decide to make a mercenary group. Like, the term Harbinger, like, Isgramor is the harbinger of us all. When you think about it like that, there can't be any other harbingers. He's the harbinger. So it's kind of like having, like, say you have like a, if I use a biblical figure like Jesus, if he were like a Jesus who like led the Nords to their homeland, you can't just then have a bunch of new ones popping up in his place to kind of, if anything, they almost need to be monks following his rules and not deciding upon new rules to add into the fold, if you know what I mean. It's like, it's almost maybe needs to be a bit more dogmatic and religious, rather than, seek, the fact that they need to seek money by taking contracts means that there's no way they can ever honor their true code completely at the end of the day.
Because they're reliant on the jobs.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't make sense for them to question.
Whereas if they got money from the state, for example, if Ulfric won and decided to have them be a religious order, then
it's kind of interesting you bring that up, because the Greymane family is sort of entrenched decently with the Companions, and you've got Yerland Greymane. He's not officially a companion, but he works the Skyforge and so on, in close relations. But it's Vignar Greymane, Yulon's brother, and the head of the Greymane family, who replaces Jarl Bolgraf if the Stormcloaks win. So you can kind of really imagine that, them, like, turning the Companions more so into a force for the Stormcloaks. Like, you're not going to have some impartial sort of like mercenaries in a civil war, like just, you can leave Whiterun and go off and help, the Imperials or something. It's like, that's not going to be happening. Especially not with like
I think at the end of the day their loyalty is just to themselves. Like, they really will sacrifice themselves for each other, but that's about it.
That's why I'm like, screw the Companions in that regard. It's like, you're not honorable, there's nothing there. It's all these fake guys. It's like, at least followers of Boethia, for example, are really honest. They're in it for themselves. They want to climb the ranks and so on. Whereas
if you go and ask the companion members, because there's a dialogue option, you can say, why are you here? they all have different reasons, ranging from I just love the lifestyle of fighting stuff to I like collecting coin and drinking. Like they all have different reasons for being there.
When you walk in for the first time, they're just having a punch up. Like that's kind of sets the tone.
Yeah,
for what they're like.
Those two seem to be at odds for whatever reason they have. But you'll notice all those people are quite rude to you throughout the Companions quest line as well, which just makes it feel like there's definitely not an atmosphere of honor or like respect. Like, for example, when you first join, you could be like, okay, fine, everyone's going to call me a whelp, whatever. It's not built to understand your achievements so far, which is a flaw in of itself. But as you progress, you're in the circle, you're a werewolf, like you're almost a harbinger. They still don't respect you. When you finally become harbinger, it's almost like they're a bit neutral. Like they're never like giving you a lot of reverence. They can be friendly at the end, but all up until then, not really.
Yeah, I totally think they should have gone with the whole like companions versus Silverhand kind of thing, and then whatever the warrior faction is that you can kind of help either side, and that kind of wins out, because then it would have been much more interesting, because there's the two philosophies sort of going on there, like basically I guess the pro werewolf sort of in it for the power kind of thing versus the true to Isgramor kind of.
Yeah, because the werewolf thing, I mean, we all know the saying absolute power corrupts absolutely, but they love it. Like Skjor and Ayla specifically, they absolutely love it. And you can tell that they're not exactly looking out for the safety of Whiterun or Skyrim and her people. When they turn you into a werewolf, you go absolutely nuts. Like in theory, like we know in the lore, like werewolf bloodlust can cause you to kill when you wouldn't normally want to. You can just rampage the whole town of Whiterun. Like I always flee. But like realistically speaking, you could just go kill a bunch of people. You wake up in the forest with Ayla and she's like, oh, you handled that all right. Haha. Like, like kind of like lol, basically is her view of it.
Well, she kind of does that. She's like, oh, you gave us even more trouble than Farkas at his first turning kind of thing, which kind of implies like destruction and murder.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's kind of like so flippantly just talking.
And then
about
she's like, it's time for a celebration. And I mean, if you think about it, like, I appreciate Ayla as much as the next Skyrim fan does, but if you be objective, she's a bit of a crazy narcissist. Like she one of the quotes she says is, she's like, oh, don't turn into a werewolf around other people, but it's not because of bloodlust or because you might scare them. It's because that they can't like stand the sight of glory before their eyes, or some reason like that. And it's like, really? Like, okay. And then you go and Skjor dies and she's all upset, and it's like, well, you are assaulting the Silverhand are not really doing much to you. Even Kodlak says, I know honor's vague, but he goes, you've taken more lives than honor demanded. And he seems almost defensive of the Silverhand, as if he does understand their motives, because he keeps saying, whether you're pro or anti-werewolf, he says, it's more complex than that. Like he keeps referring to this deeper nuance that obviously he never goes into heaps of detail about. But it does make all the Silverhand theories ring true about them being a kind of separatist group. I wonder if this is it's not really a hot take, it's really lukewarm, but like for it's probably for the elder. And you know what? We'll go into it more in the next podcast that we've got planned. Yeah. I don't know what you're gonna say.
No, I know what you're gonna say. Go on. I know what you're
gonna say. I know as well. Yeah, I know. I was
talking about Elder Scrolls 6 factions always. Like, well, basically one of my criticisms was, I was just saying that the Companions, the Thieves Guild, and even not the Dark Brotherhood as much, but the College of Winterhold, one of the biggest problems, I think, which kind of like sucks more, is that you don't get that like common goal camaraderie kind of feel. Like College of Winterhold, everyone's just there for their own research or whatever. The Companions have got all their different reasons and so on. The Thieves Guild is like, you get a bit of the camaraderie, but you don't have the same, like everyone's like, yeah, I'm just here to make money, but there's a lot of them are very down on their luck as well. Yeah, but you don't really get to join any factions where everyone's got like a lot of like conviction or something, or there's some like interesting sort of cultural code. It's all very loose and like, yeah, we're here to make some money. Here, we're here to practice some spells. Oh, here we're to be mercenaries. I mean, let's leave it. Let's leave it. I thought you were going to say. Oh yeah, it was exactly what I thought he was going to say. Pretty close. I thought you were going to say that the obsession with werewolves is like some sex thing. What? So it's pretty close.
No, but it is weird that it's like of all the
So
if
random.
it's obsessing, if it's obsessing over power, there are other ways to do it without having to go so extreme as becoming werewolves,
Yeah.
without having to diverge so far from your supposed.
But then again, I guess
There's
they.
a hot take.
But they don't have any magical. Well, if they don't have any magical abilities, or like I guess outside of like warrior prowess, or if you were like become a king or something like that. But it's like you're not going to because you're a.
I mean, the other thing that's weird, I just want to clarify it because there seems to be a lot of confusion, and I'll get your opinions on it. But there's this whole idea that Kodlak is dying from a disease. So he's like waning in power and dying from disease. I think it's the Prima game guide for Skyrim, which pretty much no one has. But it's saying like Kodlak has the rot, this disease, the rot, and he's like diminishing or whatever.
Well, yeah, because in the canon he's only 25. No, I can't prove that.
But to me, the only evidence I'm pretty sure that I could see of it in Skyrim is in his journal, where he says, "It's apparent to me now that Turfik's choice to turn us was indeed a mistake. Magics and their ilk are not in keeping with the spirit of the Companions. We face our problems directly, without the needs of such trickery. I can only hope to guide us back to the true path of Ysgramor before the rot takes me." But when I read that, my take was like, that's just his way of saying before I die of old age.
Yeah, that's
like
what
the
I
rot,
thought
I'm dying
too.
of old age. But yeah, I'm fairly sure in the Prima game guide, they like more mention it like he has a disease.
Yeah.
Like
Interesting.
if you go and find like the lore page for him, like on a wiki, it like, because another reason I don't like it is they're meant to have like a disease immunity as a werewolf. That's why it's like extra silly to me. But if I just find disease, I mean he refers to in dialogue being a werewolf as a disease, but where is this disease? Rot. I'm like Control F rot. Yeah. This is just from US, but it's like in the year 200, Kodlak contracted the rot, and his condition had rapidly diminished. He became weak in body, and his frustration showed, taking to locking himself behind closed doors, poring over old documents, desperate to cure himself of lycanthropy. I don't know, but yeah, it says he has some disease, but it's like, I don't know. I feel like in his diary, he just meant, I'm getting old and I want to fix this so that I can go to Sovngarde before death takes me, before the rot takes me, like.
Yeah.
That was my take anyway. That's my headcanon. The companion story requires a lot of headcanon sometimes.
Yeah. This is a random aside, but I just saw a picture of Kodlak on the US because I was just looking for this quote, and I'm like, do you ever just look at like old Skyrim and just like, is that a PS2 game? Like, it just looks so old.
I'll tell you what, I fully agree, and same when you go back and look at some of our earliest builds, which to be fair were filmed on a 360, but for the video I did recently about exploring one of Skyrim's unsolved mysteries with the Temple of Scrib, which everyone should go check out, nice video, that has the graphics for that, I checked Vanilla Skyrim just to check some stuff because we have a lot of mods and I wanted to make sure everything I'm saying was legit. By the way, to get Vanilla Skyrim, you need a link to it. Like, you can't search it on Steam. Like, if you want to buy 2011, I don't just mean unmodded Skyrim. I mean, if you want to buy 2011 OG Skyrim on Steam, you need a link. Anyway, I bought it, and the graphics were better than I remember, and I wondered if it was because I'm running it on like obviously a 2020 kind of PC with like a good graphics card, and all
if you're
these
running it on
optimized,
Ultra and everything
like,
compared to a 360,
it looks a lot better than some of the old original Skyrim screenshots like you'll see on the wiki. Like, it looks much better. I'm not saying it and obviously Special Edition is a big upgrade. It is, but having run original Skyrim now on a really good PC, I was kind of like, oh, I kind of relate a little bit more to that crowd who was saying when Special Edition came out, like, oh, what? It's just like the tiniest upgrade. I'm like, obviously it's better.
Yeah.
But like it does look way better than you remember is basically my point when you run it on a solid PC and not think back to our Xbox 360 days.
Yeah. to circle back to the
To
companions.
circle back to the companions.
Yeah.
Circle, quite literally the circle.
Yeah. I was going to say one thing. This is something that kind of happens with all of the Elder Scrolls, the disappointment of the gameplay versus the lore, or even what's said about the history. But like, stories about Kodlak and Skjor fighting off like 101 orc berserkers together, like back to back, like hand to hand kind of thing. And if you go through the great, the harbingers and stuff, you get some like cool story, like Mac with the piercing eyes and so on. And like, she was said to have once stared down half an opposing army, then slaughtered the remainder single-handedly. And it's kind of like, I know it's like, it's hyperbole, but even if you take that and then like halve it, it's still ridiculously powerful. You know what I mean? So it's it's that kind of thing. You never see the cool stuff.
I know. Just to clarify, I know Kodlak was found in Hammerfell when he was working as a mercenary by Askar, the current harbinger of that time, who maybe wasn't a Redguard like I thought he might be. But I think my confusion came from, there was Sirok the Lofty. So this was the first harbinger to not be of ancestral Atmoran blood. So this is kind of when all the disputes about purity and the legacy of Ysgramor came in, because Sirok eventually became harbinger by proving his worth. Like, he was just so good of a warrior. He was the most capable of the Shield brothers in the Hall, with speed and cunning surpassing any of the old Atmoran stock. So I guess he kind of set the precedent, and also contributed a lot. It says his field knowledge of blade work continues to pass to every new companion through their training. So you can see around where some of the divergence would have happened if you just look at the list of harbingers and then the change.
Yeah. If I had to pick, I'd definitely dab on the companions and just yeet them out of existence. They're not out of like factions.
Well said.
Yeah. Like, honestly, like,
would you give him a shushi as well?
In retrospect, it's like people want to come to the Elder Scrolls podcast, to discuss Elder Scrolls away from the memes and ridiculousness. Next minute. Anyway, by the way, what I was trying to say is, Fighters Guild. I actually kind of preferred the Fighters Guild over the Companions. I kind of wish that it was just the Fighters Guild. Like, either do the Companions super differently or well, but I'd rather even just take a Fighters Guild kind of
That's
thing.
essentially what they did, isn't it? They kind of just took the Fighters Guild and like, let's put a Skyrim spin on this.
Yeah. I think, though, that, giving credit where credit's due, the saving grace of the Companions, like, we all take it for granted now, but you became a werewolf. And as much as I don't like that you were forced to be a werewolf, and that essentially after one, I think, main quest, like not including Radiant quests, you became a member of the Circle. But that was so cool, because we'd never had so much fun like that before.
But you know what? At the end of the day, it's like this is just a personal take. I'd rather it be something like, you fight a werewolf, you can catch the disease or something, and then if you get the disease and become a werewolf, you can have like hunters will come after you or something, or you might get contacted or found by by another pack or something of werewolves, and then there's like a quest line or something there related to you being a werewolf. It's very like lycanthrope related, and so you become like join a little
obviously not including Daggerfall, of course, because sorry, I was thinking back on what I was saying about being a werewolf, like, or a were creature. I'm fairly sure you can do that in Daggerfall.
Yeah, but I don't know. I feel like that's it for I was thinking we could talk more about Ysgramor, but then again, I feel like Ysgramor could have a cool video or podcast unto himself. Like, his Songs of Return's got a lot of stuff, and there's some interesting theories about whether Ysgramor was a dragon or not, or that he had dragons
all the
with
500 companions were dragons.
I mean, that would help to explain some of the weird stuff about. There's a lot of weird stuff, but like even just the logistics of carrying. The fact they're using ships goes against the idea they're dragons, but because the Songs of Return will say something like they sailed across the land with waves of stone and trees flowing under their hulls, and it's like, wait, is that just a metaphor for them flying? Or are they actually sailing over the?
They may as well have been flying, because they're so good at sailing and they're so strong. That'd be the perfect cardio for any warrior. It's like, I literally rowed a boat here from Atmora. They're strong. But anyway, I don't have too much else to say about the companions. I think everything that I would say, I would probably keep for the next podcast, which is going to be an Elder Scrolls 6 discussion on factions. We can talk about some of the flaws with all of the factions and talk about what we would want from new factions in Elder Scrolls 6.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for watching. And social media links are in the description, and we will see you next time.